Me, I did not.
Okay, shame on you.
Yes.
Okay. So this film pulls back the curtain on how Mike Leigh gets these natural performances. Susie, do you want to introduce how he does it?
Well, he does it by keeping all the actors in not knowing how they feel about their roles. He gives them their roles, and you can jump in anytime, Jim, and works with them individually, and they create the character. For example, Brenda Blethyn, who was the mother, had the brief affair, I guess, with this guy. She didn't know that the baby was
Black.
a black baby. And the daughter, her name is, did you see the way my last name is spelled? Jean Baptiste?
Oh, right.
Is somebody
John Baptiste, yeah.
Yes, yes. It's a great name.
Yeah.
You go ahead and explain it, Jim, because I'm all over the place. But I was
Okay.
so impressed, so impressed.
Mike Leigh doesn't start with a script. He does his casting based on his knowledge of the actors, and he always picks really good English actors. And he'll work for as long as 6 months with them individually, developing the backstory to the character to bring them up to speed on the movie in the present time it's being told in. They don't meet until their first scenes with each other. So remarkably, the scene outside the subway station where they meet for the first time, that's the first time the two of them met. I'm not sure if she was prepared that she was black. I think not. And it's shot from a great distance, and then they punch in for close-ups as the scene progresses. But it's all about creating genuine empathy for the character on the part of the actor, so that whatever they do can feel natural and lived in for them. They're not faking it, because they've helped create that past life along with Mike Leigh for up to 6 months. It's a huge amount of time for these people to give to a single production. Those of you who like Leslie Manville, she's in this from 1996. She's a very young woman in it, 26 years ago. And she was in The Lost Daughter, and she's in Mrs. Eris Goes to Paris, which people are saying is a lot of fun. Wonderful actor. And they love working with him because they are free to help create the story. Now, I'm sure he has an idea of how the scene is to develop when they shoot it, but they probably have not rehearsed much together and have not, maybe they've seen a script, but certainly in the beginning, they're all drawing upon this past life that they've developed with the director. And it creates this sense of naturalism that is uncanny. They are living those lives, and it's not, Meryl Streep is a great actor, but she's playing a role, even though she loses herself in it. But these people, perhaps because they're British and we don't see Cynthia as Brenda Blethyn, but they feel like real people to us. We're a fly on the wall in this working class life that most of these people lead. And it's a remarkable insight into the workings of people you'd never meet on your own, or people, sort of people that you'd never meet on your own. And they reveal that, my God, they're just like us. We understand their feelings. And I think the lesson of the interview is that we realize they're just like us because they have created a whole life they can, as an actor, they can imaginatively live in. And it's a real life. It's not something made up by somebody else, but it's part of them. And it's just remarkable what the results he gets. All his movies have this touch of realism in varying doses. Some of his titles that you may have seen already, but not known: Happy Go Lucky, with a star of Maudie, which we saw and discussed, and Shape of Water. What's her name again? I'm forgetting. Mr. Turner, about the painter.
Oh, Sally
Hawkins.
Sally Hawkins was the
Right.
actress.
So she plays a very young woman in Happy Go Lucky. She also starred in A Brilliant Young Mind about the math savant son and the math competition where he learns the meaning of love. Another Year is a recent film, and All or Nothing is another title. And I've not been able to find it, but there's a film called Topsy Turvy about the Gilbert and Sullivan partnership. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing it when it came out, but I don't think it's streamable now. But all these films are worth your time because they have his stamp of authenticity. Even the period pieces, like Mr. Turner, I thought was kind of boring. I'm not going to watch it again to see if I feel differently about it. But Topsy Turvy definitely is a delight. Happy Go Lucky is fun. Happy Go Lucky is funny because this eccentric single woman decides to take driving lessons, and her driving instructor is this rigid, authoritarian, precise guy, and she drives him crazy. And there's such, you savor how she twists the knife, not meanly, but it's just who she is drives this guy nuts. And he finally goes overboard. And it's like masterful how the feeling accrues throughout the film. Brenda Blethyn was in Pride and Prejudice in 2005, I believe, or 2015. Atonement was another one of her films. And even in River Runs Through It with Robert Redford. Marianne Jean-Baptiste was in a series for 7 years called Without a Trace, which many of you have seen, and some other movies, but has work consistency. So these are real working pros that have real careers. And it's a matter of, well, oh, I die to work with Marty Scorsese. Well, these people would die to work with Mike Leigh if you'd only ask them to be in it. That's how an English actor feels. Fern?
Jim, I wonder if you could address the difference in theory between somebody like Mike Leigh, who has the people kind of become the character, versus people who are taught to act the character. And
yeah, it's a very good question. Meryl Streep has a skill that she can inhabit the skin of the characters she portrays, but she's very script bound. And she may invent a past life, but I don't know, she's been working on that past life for 6 months. And she was not an author. I mean, she's probably an author as much as she can, whatever she has to do to bring to her role, whatever she does. But some roles don't call for it. As an example, Into the Woods, the Sondheim film. It's wonderful, a wonderful film. And I did not see the Broadway show. She plays the Wicked Witch. And this is not, you don't use the Stanislavski method of empathy to create the role of the Wicked Witch. I think she was using that technique of lived-in performance, which was codified by the Russian acting coach Stanislavski in a famous book called An Actor Prepares, and Building a Character is the name of his other book. And you can see in Devil Wears Prada, she's really going back into the life of somebody she's created. And if you remember Devil Wears Prada, when her husband leaves her, there's a scene where she has to tell her assistant that he's leaving her, and she's devastated. She's 180 degrees away from the domineering, uber self-confident, aggressive, assertive fashion maven who wields a lot of power in the publishing world. And so she's doing it by skill and by training. These people have a similar training, many of them in the Royal Shakespeare Company, but it's a matter of how deep they go and how deep the story runs. Now, Susie, I'll call on you next. In the interview with Charlie Rose, he talks about the influence of time on an actor's life, or time in a character's life, and how in this film they're always referring to the past. And he was actually said that about Career Girls, another one of his films. But the past is very important, and that's how I picked up on that. Hortense was told about being adopted when she was 7 years old, flying back from Barbados to England, and her mother told her on the airplane. And that happens in the scene in the cafe, just after they meet outside the tube station. And, Blethyn doesn't want to do it, but gets talked into having tea. And at first she resists, then she realizes, oh my God, we got the dates wrong. I did have a liaison with a black man. And it comes out in that conversation, when did you learn that you were adopted? And these two women, in the various scenes they have together, they go to dinner, they go to a movie, they go to a nightclub, they're slowly chipping away at their past lives. Even if they're not citing many specific examples, it's how do you feel about your life? How did you feel about being adopted? How did you feel about your adoptive parents? How did you feel about giving me up? And why didn't you know I was black? And, you know, it's all these questions that will come up because, look, not knowing who your parent is a central identity question and an issue that many, many people struggle with.
In my movie class.
And the film was made in 1996.
What is it?
Was the law that adopted children had the right to. Miriam, please mute your speaker.
Oh, one thing I want to say, next time you give us an English film, make sure it has subtitles.
It does, and you have to click on the icon on HBO to play the subtitles. It was there. So you have to look, it's usually in the upper right-hand corner.
We got it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think Miriam had her hand up first, actually, and then Susie.
Okay, Miriam, what?
Unmute yourself, Miriam. You're muted.
It's unmuted. I'm
That's
sorry. I moved my hand, but I'm not reacting just yet.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Susie.
Well, I just want to share that from the interview with Charlie Rose, Mary Jean-Baptiste talked about how many months it took her to create the character, not from any script. She went to a high school and got the feeling of what it would be, what it's like to be an adopted child. When she went to go in search of her mother, I mean, it's like such a different way than we're talking about with someone like Meryl Streep, who has a script to memorize. I'm not saying one is more interesting than the other, or one is harder than the other, but they felt much more engaged with the story and totally engaged with the character, because they spent all these months themselves with what's his name, Michael, working all this through and talking about it.
What you're saying, Susie, is that they actually have a role in the authorship of the character.
Right.
There's
Thank
a
you.
writerly role that they're playing in helping the director. And he said, I just watched part of it again just now. He says, we're working together until we start to shoot, and it's always in flux. And he is like the mastermind conductor of all these various stories that nobody knows about. You see, even the relatives don't, they made up different stories for each other. We don't really know if he's shared some of the stories with the brother-sister or sister-in-law relationship. We don't know. But by the way, Susie, other actors do research like that, but not for 6 months. They may visit this or that place in advance of production, but it's usually the month before. Some men, if they're training for a boxing role, will train for months, or if they have to gain or lose weight, they start early on that, but nothing like this. And it's a rare opportunity.
Do you know, Jim, how actors feel about, is there some general feeling about working for him?
I think they love it. These two women certainly would give up a juicy role to work with him again. It's that sense of ownership, authorship, relying on you as a creative source of emotion and character and character traits and reactions, so that when new stuff is thrown at you, he's got some sense of how you're going to react, because he knows the character you're playing as well as you do. It's a wonderful way, and it very interestingly in the interview, he says, at first I thought anybody can do this, but now I think nobody can do this but me. And he didn't say it arrogantly. He doesn't make big budget movies, so of course he can afford to spend all that time. And he's just one of these guys who makes the kinds of movies, that he wants to make, and he makes them the way he wants to do it. And he has a style, and you don't finance a Mike Leigh movie unless you're buying Mike Leigh, and it goes against the big Hollywood studios sometimes when they want to be in the Martin Scorsese business, and he makes a stinker for them because he's indulgent, not often, but he makes films because he loves them and he loves the process. There's a lot of emotion and psychology, and he knows those characters as well as the actors because he's developed them with him. So it's like those of us who have had professional lives in whatever area, wouldn't you love to practice what you practice with a fellow professional, jointly, and have this fabulous collaboration and speak the same language about the issues, or slightly different languages, but you can connect? Isn't that one of the joys of working when it's good? Yeah, we all have clients we didn't like, right? All you lawyers know. But we've had people we love to service and love to collaborate with. The relationship becomes a real collaboration. So it's too rare. Yeah, Susie?
You're still muted, Susie.
You're muted, lower left corner. You're muted. No, can't hear you. The microphone on the lower left corner, the microphone icon, we can't hear you. So let us move on.
There you go.
There you
Now
go.
you can hear me. Okay,
Yes.
I have been under the impression that when a movie when there's scripts, and let's say the casting director gets 5 people together, that they all get the same script with them in it, and Joe Blow in it, and Moisha Pipic in it, and this one and that one and whatever, that they all get a script. And the way he makes a movie is like Brenda Blethyn. She only had to worry about herself. That's what she said in the interview.
Yeah.
This is what I loved. I only had to worry about my character and my character development. Now, is that how it goes?
Well, usually no, but it depends how important you are as an actor to the movie. Some actors will not agree to an audition until they've read the whole script. They may not want to work for the director, so they won't even read the script. Some actors who are just dying to get any job or work with that director will come in for an audition not knowing what the film's about, and they'll get what's called a side. It's a page or 2 or 3 of a scene they are auditioning with. And they'll sit and they'll read the script, and the casting director will feed them lines, and they'll respond as the character. They may know something about it. So at the high end, you're a virtual insider to what the film's about. And you may have had lunch or dinner or conversations with the director before the audition. But the higher you are, the less begging you have to do, And the lower you are on the totem pole, that is, the more substitutable you are, the less, you need to know. And sometimes directors don't want to share too much with a potential actor because they don't want them to know too much. They want to see their raw reactions. So they're trying to get in a 15-minute interview what Mike Leigh gets in 6 months of work. A hunch of what it might be like. Obviously, if they cast that person, they're going to spend some time in rehearsal, although films don't generally have budgets for rehearsals. If a film gets 2 weeks of rehearsals, that's a lot. And most of the action films don't really require it. You just read the lines. They are what they mean. Some high-end directors, depending on the film, may get more rehearsal time, but that's paid time, plus a stage to do it on, plus a casting director to attend, plus his assistant, plus, there's a whole machine that's called into action on a big movie. So what you're seeing is this is one of the virtues of independent filmmaking, where it's not about the money or the stars. It's about what you deliver to the screen in terms of available empathy. What kind of a person are you inventing to make friends with the audience? And that's what we're feeling when we see a movie like this. But there's no generalization, but so it depends who you are. Generally, the stars, co-stars, And people who are in several scenes will get the whole script. Depends how important your role is to the story. Yeah.
In this particular movie, but they didn't have a script.
Well, they may have, by the time they were shooting, it's kind of like a reality show. Okay, this is what's going to happen. You're going to go talk about why your mother bothers you to your boyfriend, or you're going to go sit down with this woman and have tea for the first time, or you're going to ask her to go to your daughter's 21st birthday party, and she's going to resist. There's a degree of improvisation and there's a degree of scripting. I don't know with this one.
Okay.
There's always a degree of improvisation. In reality shows, which I hate to cite, but having given 11 years of my life to them, and have the scars to show from it, there's a description of a show called soft scripted. Now, many of you may remember your children 20 years ago watching a reality show called, or 10, 15 years ago, called The Hills. It's basically a millennial girls show about young professionals in LA who live in the hills and their lives and their boyfriends. And that was soft scripted in that the lines weren't written, but they were told what to say or how to react, and they'd work it out. And they do multiple takes, and they get direction in between the takes. So in a way, it was written on the fly and finessed on the set. Another series you may love is the Larry David Show. And as far as I know, to this day, it has a very similarly unusual production format. Larry has a script in mind, and he'll shoot it, right? And then he'll make up new lines and new aspects of the action. And they'll shoot it different ways. And of course, sometimes the new material conflicts with the old. So the poor editor has to figure out, how do I mesh what we plan to do with what we have and what was invented, and does it make sense? It becomes a very complicated jigsaw puzzle because every take is different.
Jim, would you shift us now to talking about the story itself?
Well, I think all we have to do is say, would this be a movie? You didn't know that the child you gave up was of another race because you were so intimidated. You were 16 years old, and the Sisters of Mercy took no mercy on you, and they took the daughter away without your seeing. No, in the movie, they offered to show her the daughter. And she declined because she was 16, and it's too horrible an experience for her. So she didn't know the girl was Black. Plus, she thought it was from another man that she'd been with. And she knew she'd been pregnant. And she thought she knew who the father was, but it was somebody she slept with 6 weeks before. And I think, I don't know how this plot came together, but it makes sense that she has a very difficult relationship with her daughter, Roxanne. Very difficult. I mean, that first scene when they're sitting smoking together in the living room, and the mouth on the daughter, it's like painful. There's so much anger in the room, and in both directions for the most part, but Roxanne is very bitter. And you wonder, where did that come from? And when you add the knowledge, the secret, remember, this is about secrets and lies, deceptions we play on our relatives, and secrets we withhold from them. That she didn't tell her about a prior pregnancy. No, the only people who knew were her brother, Morris, as the Brits would say, and Morris, his wife. And they were sworn to secrecy. So the three family members are keeping secrets from Roxanne. But Roxanne and Morris have a very close relationship. Witness that children's photo, one of the first he took, very loving photo he took of her. And in the beginning, it's revealed how fond he is of her and how they haven't seen her in so long. And they're talking about her like their daughter. They have no daughter. So that's another issue, right? It's kind of like each family unit mirrors the other with a little distortion or a slightly different twist. They're childless. And Cynthia had 2 children she didn't want, and the problem between Morris and his wife is that they have no children and it's driving them apart. You know, he says at one point, I'm worried you don't love me anymore at the end. And so, you know, each family unit is a slightly different picture. Likewise, Roxanne's relationship with Paul, the boyfriend, is like, don't get too attached to me. You know, this is just what we do. And she's hiding that she has feelings for him too. And so that's kind of a secret. Maybe it's not a lie. It's very interesting. You remember the scene where Brenda Blethyn asked her, are you using contraception? It's a long argument they have about what kind and stay out of my life, Mom. And what's the next scene? Anybody remember? She runs to Paul's apartment and they're stripping off their clothes. You know, it's like, so he's telling us through plot action how what these people do to each other and what it drives them to.
Jerry, did you want to insert something now? Unmute, Jerry.
Where's Jerry? There he is. You're muted still.
Lower left.
There's a little icon, a microphone icon.
Lower left.
Move your cursor to the black area away from the picture.
Okay. Now, I don't understand what the big deal or why the secret between the husband and wife about being childless was such a big deal.
Well, this was the 90s and they were ashamed. The wife, I forget her name. Wish I could remember.
They were ashamed of not being able to get pregnant?
Yes, it's a failing. Remember, this was 26 years ago when we didn't talk quite as openly about it. It wasn't de rigueur to talk about your fertility status.
Okay, thank you.
So, you know, that's another mirror. They're childless. Brenda Blethyn had 2 children she didn't want. Roxanne is having sex but doesn't want children. Hortense isn't even attached to a guy, although she's not a virgin. There's that fun scene with the black woman, her friend. Remember, very early, she's only in one scene. They're at Hortense's apartment and they're drinking wine in the afternoon and they're talking about their mothers. Again, it's all about the past haunting us in the present. And the other woman couldn't stand her mother, but her mother raised her to adulthood, right? And that's a difference, you know. And sure, Hortense had problems with her mother, but adored her. And you know, the scene starts with the funeral of Hortense's mom. So, you know, people bring their past lives forward and in the sharing. I mean, that's where there were no secrets or lies between these 2 women. It's kind of a foil for all the other relationships in the movie. Joanne.
Yeah, Jim, I may have this wrong, but towards the end of the movie, Hortense kept asking her mom about her father. And her mom kept saying, wouldn't talk about him and saying, no, he wasn't a nice man. Whereas when she talked about her other child's father, she would talk about him positively. And I kind of got the feeling at the end of the movie that maybe she was raped and not had an affair. Is that a possibility?
No.
No.
No, it was just recklessness. Remember, she said in the beginning scene, she said, I had nice legs. I was known for my nice legs. You know, I turned plenty of heads and I probably still could. So she saw herself as a sexual being, which is nothing wrong with that. But she just didn't think, look, she was 16 years old. What 16-year-old, even in working class Britain, wants to have a child out of wedlock? You know, very tough life ahead for both of you. And at least that's how I saw the film. I think that's the way to look at it to understand. Again, there's this duality. Think of Roxanne's anger when she finds out you didn't want to have me, and then you also didn't share your whole life completely when you did have me by telling me about this other birth you had. So it's not that the facts cause any fallout. It's the feeling of, I'm not really privy to your life. Like I wasn't, you didn't really want me because you didn't want to share your life completely with me. So that's the hurt that's inflicted on Roxanne. Roz, Raybo?
I thought the mother, what's her name again?
Cynthia.
Yeah, the mother. I thought that she was like a little bit off. And
Yeah, she was a little daft. Yeah, I agree.
I don't think that she knew 1 and 1 makes 2, or she didn't really get a lot. And
She
so
was ditzy. I think you're right in your perception.
she was ditzy. And I think at 16, she was probably really ditzy.
I
And
agree. Yeah.
so she didn't know what was going on. And she still didn't quite get things. So, you
Yeah,
know,
she doesn't get her daughter.
I
She
felt,
doesn't get
I
Roxanne.
felt sympathetic for the daughter, not Hortense, the other daughter.
Yeah, she had a loving mother.
No, Hortense did, but her,
Yes, Hortense had a loving mother, but Roxanne feels she doesn't. And there's a lot of animosity between them.
absolutely.
You know, like, and Roxanne's friend in the breakfast area there, you know, said, oh, I didn't like my mother. She said, well, at least she carried, you know, she raised you to adulthood. You know, she was with you. She didn't abandon you. And like Hortense's mother did.
I think children are often enraged. They're enraged when they find out that some major aspect of who their parents are is not the truth. They feel it calls into focus whether the rest of their lives are the way they saw them or not, because who your parents are is who you are. And if you didn't, what you thought were your parents is not, then who are you? It's very complicated. And children who didn't know about adoption, Cindy could probably address this better than any of us here. Cindy, you want to unmute and say something about it?
Well, we have to think of the times that, and the time, I don't remember what year it's supposed to take place, but adoptions were very embarrassing. They were secretive. Girls who were in high school went to visit their sick grandmother for 6 months, and then they would return, and it was never discussed and never mentioned. In the 80s and 90s, things became much more open. Girls were not ashamed. They were able to pick out the adoptive parents. We were doing open adoptions. I have to say, I was very offended by the social worker. I mean, she was very inappropriate.
Well, do you think she was condescending, or what do you mean by inappropriate?
She just wasn't professional. I mean, I only did searches when the search person was on vacation, but just a lack of compassion and understanding and kindness.
I saw her a different way. I thought she was very low key and perhaps a little bored with what she did, but she'd been through it so many times, she didn't hyper dramatize any of it. That she was a quiet voice and said, this won't be easy. I did feel compassion from her. I wonder why we saw it differently.
I guess because I've done it, but yeah. And the other thing is, obviously it's British laws versus American laws. Yeah. I haven't done it recently, but we were not allowed to give identifying information. So we had to kind of play this game legally of giving enough clues so that the client could figure it out and guess. And then when like clients would come to me with like 2 or 3 guesses, I couldn't really say you're right. But when they would name the right person, I would say, well, just use your intuition. And, we had to play games, but I think now, people are all finding their birth parents, even from close adoptions, because with this DNA stuff, they're finding aunts, uncles, cousins, and it leads them, and the family secrets all come open.
Right.
But the other thing too is we work with our families to tell children from the very start. So it's never one day like, oh, you're 10 years old, I'm going to tell you. That a child always hears it. It's always part of their identity. And it's never that shock value of, well, who am I? I didn't know. What else did you lie to me about? And we work with families to train them to do that from the start. But I know like in the 50s, a lot of adoptive parents didn't even tell their kid ever they were adopted till there was a medical crisis.
Right. It brings to mind a film we discussed years ago, 3 Intimate Strangers. where the triplets were separated.
Right, that was shocking.
Yeah, that very shocking. It had huge consequences. One of the brothers committed suicide,
Right.
Right.
you know, and was very troubled. That was a
And
great.
only because they were identical that they were found out.
The two were identical. One was not. You know,
Brad and then Steve Greenberg. Thank you, Cindy.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask Jim about what seemed to me to be some loose ends and how I should be reacting to that. For example, the scene with and it was a rather lengthy scene with the prior owner of the business.
Yeah.
I didn't see where that went. Let me just finish with the three that were on my mind. The second was the assistant and what she was doing at this family reunion. Was there some story that wasn't developed? And then even the anger of Roxanne towards her mother, it wasn't real clear to me from where all of that anger was coming from. So, I mean, to me, they were loose ends. And does that represent some kind of flaw in the movie? Or is that just his style of realism that, not everything gets tied up, neatly with a ribbon?
Not all films go back and tell the backstory of every character. Lots of good dramas we're starting at square one and we move forward from there. And the past issues and relationships come out as we go. The photographer's scene, I saw that and I had to watch it a second time, including a few minutes before that. And if you remember, first, we've seen a lot of vignettes of Morris's photographs of various kinds of people. Most are very funny. Most feature people who don't want to be photographed in family settings. And the woman who had her dog, and only her dog was funny. There were so many of them. But the one that really stands out is this stunning woman who has a scarred face from an auto accident. And you don't know it at first. And then she turns her head and you see it. And you wonder, why is she photographing this? And it's for her claim, their insurance claim against the car that, was at fault. And at the end of the scene, she says, I used to be a beauty expert and I was good at what I did. So she's still beautiful, but in that world and in that line of business, it's hard to sell cosmetics because people don't want to look at her face. And the conclusion is there's a line at the end of that scene where, life's difficult. It doesn't always turn out the way you want it to. And as she leaves the photo shop, he's been the guy sitting on a bus bench outside, and they think he's a pervert or a wino or something. And he then comes into the shop and he said, "Hi, I'm the guy who sold this to you. I'm down on my luck. And if it weren't for me, you wouldn't be this well off." And Morris has to stand up for himself for the first time in the movie. He said, no. You did nothing. Your client list was awful. I got no leads. I called, I wrote, nothing happened. There was nothing here before. I'm the one who built it up into this nice photo studio. And then he asked to borrow a camera. And I didn't understand that line because he doesn't leave with one. And he drinks, he pours whiskey or vodka into his tea when they serve him tea. And clearly the guy is down on his luck. And again, the answer is life doesn't always turn out the way you want it to or expect it to. Right. And I think that's that's right in the middle of the film, by the way. And I think that's the whole point, is to prepare us for, when you least expect it, smile, you're on candid camera. You're in reality. And you see yourself for the first time. And Morris even says to the Photoshop owner, "That could have been me," as he's walking off. And again, they're all going through this period of intense self-reflection. You know, Roxanne's questioning her relationship with her boyfriend. Cynthia is upset about her relationship with Roxanne, and then this newfound relationship with Hortense. Morris and his wife are, you know, at a tough place. Everybody is inching towards a boiling point, which is the birthday party, which, you know, you wonder, it happens so late and it's so long, and they don't get into it till the last 12 minutes of the movie. And then it's all hell breaks loose. And all these things that have been percolating under the surface are finally spoken about. And throughout the film, I'm sure I can't find it in my notes, but people talk about the things they leave out. Let me see if I can find a few. Morris says at one point, you know, my father couldn't share his pain with us. And I used to hate him for that when they lost their mother. And now as an adult, he feels sorry for his dad because he couldn't share the pain. So you know, that's another example of how people take baby steps to awareness, to dealing with where they're stuck, where they're trapped. And that was one of his realizations. Let me see if I can find another example. Somebody says, oh, you can't miss what you never had. But the other person says, oh, yes, you can. You know, like Hortense misses her real mother, or I think, I forget who said
Please
it.
don't say real mother. It's birth mother. I'm sorry, I'm very sensitive about that.
Let's see if I can find another example. Sorry, my 1960s language is still with me.
Mitchell, while he's looking, did you have a comment?
Yes, Joanne, I agree with you. She did appear ditzy, particularly in that scene when she first met her daughter, and she asked the daughter what she does, and the daughter said she's an optometrist, and it was like totally blank what that meant. And then she said, well, you know, an optician, and she didn't even register at all. You know, she looks dry. She said, well, you have to come over my house and look at my eyes. I mean, that was about as ditzy as you could get on the scene. The other thing that surprised us was that the daughter, when they had that first scene in the tea shop, the daughter sat down close to and right next to her mother, instead of sitting on the opposite side, as I might have expected.
Uh-huh.
I was a little surprised at that. And
Well,
the third thing I wanted to mention was that the three women who were all having trouble, they could have used, I guess, what we saw a few weeks ago, or almost time.
About time.
About time, yeah.
Need to relive certain moments and
Yes.
review them. Okay, about the sitting next to each other side by side. It was certainly easier to shoot. But again, this is about the seeming closeness, or the closeness they're about to discover. And I found that scene particularly moving when the only way for Brenda Blethyn, Cynthia, to turn away out of shame was to turn her nose into the wall and weep against the wall. And for me, the whole scene was worth that, the setup. If they'd been facing each other, she could have turned side to side to avoid her. I bought it, you know. It's yes, it wasn't the way you or I would have done it, but you know, I can't explain Mike Lee's actions. I can only say the consequences of that decision to shoot them side to side were powerful for me.
I think also she was showing her documents. She wanted to.
That's true. You're right, Barbara.
Showing her documents.
You're right. Let me prove to you, it was easier. You could have shot it across from each other as well, but that's a very natural way of showing documents. So both of you read it right side up. So, you know, we can't second guess too much. You just have to kind of go with it and not be thrown by it, because sometimes it's, you know, an accident. Sometimes there was a purpose. Sometimes we can never know.
Marlene?
Yeah. we haven't talked about the film itself. First of all, I was knocked out by Brenda Blethyn's performance. And she was the ditzy one, and yet she was the one who understood that she had to bring out the truth in the party at to the family when everybody was together. She was the one who was sensitive to everybody's feelings in the relationship, in their different relationships. And to me, I felt that Morris's wife, was it Monica? Was that her name?
Yes, Monica. Right, that's right.
That Monica was so angry at
Morris.
at
Cynthia.
Brenda, at Cynthia, that because she was so able to have children and was making a mess of their lives or discarding them. I just really thought the film was done so well, and the actors really made you feel their pain as if it was real.
Let me ask you something. Were you ever aware of the camera or a movement or a shot, or were you always focused on what the characters were feeling? Think about your experience.
I always focused on the characters and how they were feeling.
Yeah, and that's a mark of a really good film. It means you're so empathetically engaged, you're with them.
And I mean, and the wealth of tears that came out of this woman. She was crying basically the whole film, and just kind of being, she was that character.
Yeah, it's like, I know when I'm upset or frustrated, I transfer that anger to sometimes other people or other situations, and it's unfair, but it's because I have those tears. They're always there just beneath the surface. And you see in Cynthia's role, every scene pushes her a little closer to that edge.
Right.
So that's why the tears, I don't say they come easily to her, but it's because she's lived in that character's life since the girl was 16 years old, that she sees as an adult, her imagination is so vivid of what that would have been like to live in, to actually have that experience, because she's thought about it so much. And play acted. I mean, part of their working together is to act this stuff out. Their rehearsal is improvisational. How should she move? What should she say? What are her feelings about this? How should she express them openly, or should she turn her head to the wall and cry because she's ashamed of crying or ashamed of what she did and can't face the infant now grown whom she rejected? It's very rich. And, when you live with that for 6 months, the tears are your own. They're not just the made up characters. And I felt that too. And, most adults feel the way you did, Arlene. They were that moved by the performances.
Marty?
What struck me was that it took Morris's outburst at the party to trigger feelings of empathy by everybody else for one another. They really did begin to bond as a result of his outburst.
So let's hear it for sensitive men.
Cynthia became loving towards Monica. Monica better understood Cynthia. Roxanne softened. They just became more of a family. And in that last scene in the backyard, where the last line of the movie, where Brenda's character, Cynthia, says, "Ain't this the life?" She's finally settling into being a whole person with family.
Right. They were all able to face the roadblocks that they had placed in front of themselves
Yeah.
regarding each other. And they're liberated. And it's kind of an odd structure because it all gets dumped in the last couple of minutes. I mean, just huge stuff.
It's a very long movie that gets resolved beautifully at the end. I think
2 hours and 12 minutes.
Steve Greenberg, did you still want to say something? I think I may have forgotten you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, my camera isn't working, but the microphone is. And since we're on that last barbecue birthday party scene, I wanted to call attention to, it was just extraordinary. He plunked the camera down and in a wide shot of the whole thing, and talk about choreography. I mean, that couldn't have been very improvised, because between the physical motions of these people serving salad and drinks and interacting at the table, and Morris cooking all the meat and depositing on the plates, that was like watching almost a ballet or a French farce with the interactions, physical and verbal, of all these characters. It was remarkable. That scene went on so long with no camera movement, from that just one perspective, no editing, no intercuts, just one long shot. It was remarkable.
It was. And if you look at it, there's one chair that's not occupied, and that's the opening up of the table for the camera when Morris is barbecuing in the background. It's like,
yeah,
it's you don't notice it. It's so planned. You're so right, Steve.
I wanted to comment that two things that I think that at the end, when he basically said, everybody, all of us, all humans suffer. We're in pain. Life is hard. And our task is to figure out how to be kind to each other, because we're all on a difficult journey. I was struck by how perfect this film was for what the theme of what you've been trying to do from the beginning of these classes is really to say, to look for the pain and the connection of human beings to each other. So it just spoke to me of Jim's class all over, and I did love that. On a second note, I do need to go back to the comment that Cindy made, and I don't want it brushed aside. It's not just, oh, well, language really, really matters, and it matters to the people about whom it's spoken. It's really significant, and I just don't want it to be washed over. Even though it's unintentional, it's not a blame issue, but it's important to understand.
To educate.
It's important to understand what it means to people.
Yeah, I stand corrected, and I'm sorry.
So it could be a birth mother or a bio mom is the woman who gives birth, and the people who raise you are just mom and dad. They could be adoptive parents, but they're the parents.
I get it.
Brad, unmute.
Yeah, Jim, there actually was one moment when I became very aware of the camera work. And that was when Maurice had his explosion and delivered his soliloquy. Yeah. There was something about the way the camera just captured him that just made me very aware of the camera work. And at no other point in the movie was I so aware.
It was probably a single shot on him with other people coming and going. The camera panned with his movement. I don't know. I don't remember it that well. I'm just riveted. When he said we're all in pain, it's like, oh my God, this is it. And it comes from him, the guy who appears to be kind of a klutz in the beginning, and he winds up being the sensitive, wise one, which I thought was delightful.
But he was always kind. I mean,
he was always kind. Yeah.
All of his interactions, he wasn't wise, and certainly the theme, one of the themes is that secrets and lies harm everybody.
Right.
But he was a secret keeper too. And it didn't come out well, but he was always kind. And the conclusion at the end that all of this stuff aside, we are connected by our pain and by our desire then to help heal each other by love.
Yeah, I was moved by, he turns to Hortense, who we've neglected when all the fireworks are going off among the relatives. And he says, I really respect you because you're the only one who's willing to share the truth and face it. You know, and she's kind of stunned a little bit. They didn't make a big deal out of that moment, but it's like he's pointing out her role. She was the only one who pursued the truth, no matter how much it hurt her. And, you know, those of us who have, who had parents who didn't say much, you know, that resonates, you know, and you realize how much you can miss that, you know, and I guess that's why I responded to the notion of you can't miss what you don't have. And no, you can a great deal because you feel the absence, even if you never knew what it felt like to fill the void. It's just a human longing that isn't, we're hardwired to want love and affection and connection. And when that's absence, you feel the absence of it.
Brad?
Yeah.
On you?
Yeah, I'm wondering about the fact that he's a photographer, and what the symbolism possibly is there. I mean, certainly the movie begins with the scene of him taking a photo of his bride.
Yeah.
Well, wait, is
the funeral.
First the funeral or the
Funeral.
picture?
The credits.
Is the funeral.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but the photography seems to be a very important factor in this film. And how does that tie in?
Well, you know, we say photographs are real, but they hide or show a lot of things. And in each of the families and groupings that he poses, there's a dynamic in there, and they're not all of the same mind. You see the dissonance between the characters. So even these supposedly happy, well-lit family shots reveal a lot of stress and grief and fractures, you know, except for the lady and her dog, you know, which is all love. And of course, the woman with the scarred face reveals a solo fracture, but, you know, a real hurt that is obvious.
Or the bride that was
yeah, the bride, right. Yeah,
Right.
that's the very first one. There's the chauffeur with the old car, and it's a castle, and he's inside, and there's something wrong with the bride. She's having trouble smiling.
That
And
surely is symbolic of,
yeah, right. It's like,
metaphorical.
right. And so there's something elusive and elusive about every photograph. You know, it doesn't tell the whole truth, and we can see into it or not, as the case may be. And of course, you can say it's a metaphor for cinematography and movies themselves. But when we talk about it, we peel back the layers, you know, of how these films are built, how they're put together, and with what intention. You see deeper into them, you know. And believe me, if you studied the film and looked at each of those photo sessions he had, you'd find a different meaning in each one, and satisfying and fun too. You know, the sourpuss in the background, who's the husband, you know, and the wife is beaming in the front, and the other family members are around, and
Isn't that a kind of postmodern meta theme that you're looking at?
Yeah, it's beyond. But you see, all these films and the films that have engaged us the most, like Those Who Remained, or Song of Names, or Everything Will Be Illuminated, it's always about our observation of the scene. We're there probing and questioning just like the characters are. And it's filmmaking today. I've noticed this because I watch a lot of films from the 60s and 70s, and you know what? A lot of them don't hold up. They may have knocked me out when I was in college, but I can see how overstated they are. And today's films, the ones that we discuss, the modern ones, are they tell a lot by showing. They don't tell by telling. They're not verbal. Actions speak louder. We intuit the intention of the characters much more than ever in the past, because we're smarter movie watchers. We've inherited a way of reading films like we read books. And we are more sophisticated now than we were 20, 40 years ago or when we were kids. And the medium has progressed with us or has pushed us forward. And it's really important to realize that we have a film literacy that people in the 50s and 60s didn't have.
Interesting.
You know, it's really literacy in the best sense of the word. We know how to read and read into and derive meaning from these films that aren't necessarily on the surface. But they're there in the connection that the filmmaker chooses to make. You see causation from one scene to another. Like the disappointment of the beautician with a scarred face to the drunken ex-photographer. Life, you know, throws us monkey wrenches. That pushes the story forward. And then Morris says, gee, that could have been me, which brings him to his own climax, his own crisis of identity, where he finally blurts out what's wrong with his whole family. The three women I love the most are at war with each other. He'd never say that in the beginning of the film because he didn't know it himself. But the action of the film has brought him to this level of awareness. And that's what we share with the characters. And that's why film is so relevant today, because it gets under our own skins, become the actors, more so than ever before.
Steve Greenberg, did you want to add something?
Yes, I certainly do. Thank you. Making Morris a photographer was the perfect vehicle to make him such an understanding character. We saw how adept he was at eliciting the perfect pose, the perfect response, the perfect moment from all of these subjects he was photographing. It showed the gift he had for that, so that when he displayed this later on with his own family, we understood why he could feel all that and appreciate that and perceive that.
Right.
It was the absolute perfect choice for what he was and why he was a photographer in the movie.
Right, I agree.
Nice.
Anyone else?
Yeah.
Okay, well, maybe we should talk about upcoming events.
Oh, Art, did you want to add something? Go ahead. Unmute. That's it.
Excuse me.
We have to get rid of the duck. There it is.
Okay.
All right. I just wanted to mention we're concerned throughout our evenings together with the Jewish sensibility that these films bring to us. I just wanted to mention that Mike Lee is from a Russian Jewish family whose name was Lieberman, and
I had no idea.
they changed it for
in order to get work.
reasons of survival. But he's a nice Jewish boy.
So interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, I think he became an atheist, but his background is Jewish, and he's been concerned all his life with social causes, and his films reflect it.
Listen, a lot of good Jews are atheists.
Yes, they are.
Don't count us out.
Jim, before we go on to the what's going to the future, I just wanted to mention that Hortense was in a wonderful series on Acorn TV called Broadhurst.
Oh, yeah.
Broadchurch.
Yeah, we
in
saw
Broadchurch?
Broadchurch. Yeah.
Yes, and she was really such a wonderful character, and a little different than she was in this one. But Acorn is kind of a British type streaming service.
Okay, thanks for that. Remember, this film is 26 years old. And that was the very beginning of, if you go back and look at the credits, it was the beginning of her career. And Brenda Blethyn was a little more advanced than that. And certainly was the beginning of Olivia Colman's career.
I just thought of one comment that I wanted to make, that although it was about an interracial family and a child who didn't know her mother was white and a mother who didn't know her child was Black, it was not the main thrust of this. This was about people. Ultimately, any people of any color. The fact that they didn't know things was surprising, but it was, I thought that was an interesting piece.
Yeah, I agree. It's really about the people, who they were at their cores and what the issues were. Any more comments? Randy, do you want to share something with us? Lower left corner, you're muted.
Oh, yes. I saw it back in 1996, and I was just, I liked the movie. I guess the thing that I saw was that, I guess Mr. Lee made Hortense, did not make her appear biracial. This, she was very, very black. Yeah. So I think he did that purposely, where people probably wouldn't kind of slide off, say, well, she doesn't look that black, or she's, if anything in the movie, the lady at the the person at the clinic for the optometrist, she was more biracial. She would have been the person to really be Hortense, because she was very much biracial.
The secretary or assistant.
Yes. The receptionist. She was really the biracial person in the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's funny in that he wanted to make sure we could tell the difference.
Yes, yeah, very much so. And and say, he don't give people excuses. Well, she's not that black, it's not that, but she is black without a doubt. So good point on his part. I mean,
well, and also, Randy, I thought when the two friends were talking, Hortense and her friend, that was clearly a different culture and a different way of interacting. It didn't feel like white women talking. It definitely was black women talking with each other.
Yes. That was definitely, a very good a cultural sense right there. This is the way it is. Yes.
Okay, and Fern, I have a question for you in your work as a family lawyer and other work. You mentioned that secrets tear families apart. Can you anonymously share how the divorce process opened up all those wounds for people, or is it just too big a topic to get into?
For me?
No,
me.
Fern.
Because I'm not a lawyer, I'm a doctor.
Well, okay. I think that mainly, what I see is people will often say, the kids don't know. They don't know what's happening. And they're seething. They're so angry, they're nearly spitting. And they say, but I don't let the kids know this. Don't worry, I'm not letting the kids know. And I will often say that's remarkable, because in my family, if I twitch my eyebrows, my kids say, what? They know. I said, having kids live with you is like having the CIA live with you. They know everything. But people think that they can hide it.
Well, that's part of the
families know everything. They feel it. They know history that didn't happen.
That's the secret and the lie. It's like we kid ourselves that other people can't see it.
Right.
Okay, so on the 27th, we're going to discuss a film. Again, I can't make up my mind, but I do encourage you for fun to look at The Duke. I mean, Jim Broadbent's just wonderful. And it's a charming story. Helen Mirren is very understated, totally transformed into an old lady.
What's the
it's
platform?
A fun. What? Oh, that's on Amazon Prime. I just hit Amazon Prime, as did another film. I'm going to watch it. You may see it next, called The Official Competition. And that's from the same team of directors who did Distinguished Citizen. And it's more light. I'm going to take a look at Topsy Turvy, the Gilbert and Sullivan comedy that Mike Leigh also directed, to see if you'd like to see it. And what else? There's Duvernay's first film called Middle of Nowhere, about a Black woman whose husband's in jail. Very first film is quite remarkable, about the spouse of an inmate. And what else might we see? Okay, there's a comedy. I have to see it again, but it's called Guess Who's Back? And it's about what would happen if Hitler returned. And a lot of people are sensitive to making fun of Hitler. unless you're Mel Brooks, when you say this is the best way of undermining any authenticity. If people would take offense at that, let me know. You can send me an email about that. It's not bad. I saw it about a year ago. The Irishman, which is a 3-hour movie that Scorsese did, where all the mobsters age backwards in time. And it's De Niro and Harvey Keitel and Joe Pesci. It's an incredible film. It's 3 hours long, and there's not a lot of action in it, but it's about how these guys cope with where they are at the end of their lives. I'd love to program that just because it's such a good film. I don't know how much there will be for us to talk about it. I didn't know there'd be this much to talk about this film.
Jim, do you have an idea?
No.
In September, because of the
Yeah,
holidays.
I have to get with Hannah Cole about that. And we do a dance around the high holidays.
Yeah.
And they're actually a month long because there's Simchas Torah, which follows Yom Kippur, and we have to stay out of the way of that. So I don't have a sense yet. I often program a film in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. And on that day, I like to show films about forgiveness and understanding and coming clean. In the past, we saw the South African film After the Rain, about the white soldier and the white girlfriend.
Your film.
Yeah.
It was fabulous. Anybody who hasn't seen it should get it from you.
Yeah. So it's films like that. And I'll come up with something decent, I promise. There is an absurdist film. I haven't seen it yet. It's on Kino Lorber. It's called Apples. It's about it's not what you think. It's not like a apocalyptic film. There's a virus that overtakes the earth, where people lose their identity and their memory of who they were. And this is the story of one man who's chosen to be reprogrammed with a new life. So there's all these ways of introducing contemporary culture to him. So he gains new memories. And it sounds very tempting. It's called Apples. It's gotten some good notices from the critics. And that's enough to throw at you. I have to see HUD, though. Oh, and there is that 6-hour documentary on Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward that highly recommended.
Really good.
Yeah, it's really all about how he distrusted celebrityhood and was a modest guy. And he confesses that he adopted car racing as a hobby because he wanted something really dangerous instead of the fake dangers of Hollywood. So I'm looking forward to watching that myself. And that's enough, but do see The Duke. You'll like it. You'll have fun with it. The other films I'm looking at, but aren't quite available yet, Both Sides of the Blade. It's a French marriage mystery. And Murina, about it's a mother-daughter relationship with a bad husband in the middle, set in Greece. And it's gotten very good notices.
What's it called again?
Murina, M-U-R-I-N-A. And the streaming pattern has been a film that's much desired. It's announced streaming at $20 a rental, or there's a DVD for $20, and then eventually they come back to just streaming for $4 to $5. And that's very interesting. So I don't even watch those for myself because it's ridiculous. Although movies, by the way, if you haven't been to a movie theater, have inflated in price. Even the senior tickets are quite expensive now. I think with your
Lenly's $6 during the week.
Yeah. But you go to an AMC, and it's like $16 plus $1.50 for the automated ticket. So you're up there. Not to complain because I don't go to movies either. So we'll do something nice. And thank you. It was a good discussion tonight. I'm glad it resonated with so many people. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Take
I'll
care.
be in Greece.
Bye.
I'll see you after Greece.
After. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.